Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster rear anti-sway bar on our 2014 Forest River Lexington. Having a motorhome can be a really nice thing. We can take some trips with our family and see a lot of places we've never been before. But the one thing a lot of people don't really think about or talk about is how nervous people can be when they're driving their motorhome, because it is a rather large vehicle. Not to mention they don't handle the best. It's a really large vehicle with a lot of area for wind to catch, so we're basically just driving down a giant windscreen. A big truck comes by, pushes you down the road, we end up fighting the steering wheel, moving around in our seat. That's not very enjoyable for us because we're having to concentrate so much on keeping it driving straight, not to mention everyone in the back's getting tossed around. So they're not that enjoyable off the bat. But that's where all those suspension enhancements are going to help out. Everybody wants to have that enjoyment, and they should. Your motorhome should be an enjoyable thing, not a chore. So before we put any components on, we're going to take it on our test course and get a baseline to see how it handles. So I'm going to come up to our slalom course and try to keep it as close to the same speed as possible, right about 10 miles an hour. Just been going in and out of turns just to see how the motorhome handles. And I can already notice the problem that a lot of people do. As soon as you go into a turn, you feel like it's leaning before it turns, which kind of makes you feel a little top heavy. Really doesn't react as quickly as it should. And I'm only going 10 miles an hour in a parking lot, so again, on those bigger drives or on the highway or really getting into any kind of traffic and speed, you're definitely going to be feeling those problems a lot more. Even going 10 miles an hour through the course, it definitely feels like I just kind of need to stay at this speed, if not slow down a little bit, because again, each turn I go into is kind of a blind turn. It's not reacting when I think it will, so I really need to pay attention, slow down, and make sure I have a firm grip on the steering wheel. Well, now that we have everything installed, let's go ahead and take it back onto the test course and see what kind of improvements we got. I'm going to try my best to keep it right at that 10 miles an hour so we have a really good comparison. As I come into the first turn, I can already tell a decent amount of difference here, especially in the sway. I don't feel as much of a leaning going on. It does react a little bit quicker. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't feel like I'm driving a sports car, but it definitely feels a lot more manageable and a little bit more predictable of what it's going to do. As I'm coming into the turns, it's reacting quicker, it doesn't want to lean as bad, and again, I just kind of know what it's going to do. It's more predictable, which makes it a lot easier to drive. Definitely a lot smoother and easier to control, and genuinely just feels like I could go faster if I wanted to. I do want to mention we did install more than one component, and the results we're getting were because of the effect of all of them together. We ended up putting the Roadmaster Reflex steering stabilizer on the front, the Roadmaster front anti-sway bar, as well as the Roadmaster rear anti-sway bar. Now that's what I would suggest anyway, because that will give us full stability from the front of the motorhome all the way to the back. That we don't have to worry about all those things. Typically there's a bathroom, maybe a bedroom in the back. That can cause a lot of weight problems and shifting, but having all those components together, your motorhome will have the full stability. In our experience, most of the time when people get one component, it does help, but they end up coming back and getting the rest of them because the compounding effect makes it that much better. Now that we have our test run done, let's go ahead and take it to the shop and take a closer look. So here's what our Roadmaster rear anti-sway bar looks like once we have it installed. Now this is going to help out with those crosswinds and all that unwanted feeling when you get when you're driving and feel like you're getting pushed around, or kind of that swaying loose feeling in the back end. Well, this is going to greatly help out because it attaches directly to the axle as well as the frame, so it's going to have that leverage, so whenever the motorhome starts to turn, the bar is not going to allow it to, trying to keep it as level as possible. And because the sway bar is going to be taking away a lot of those feelings and diminishing them, we're going to feel like we have more control and we can relax, which means we're not going to have so much white knuckle driving, have a death grip on the steering wheel, or be fighting the steering wheel. We can relax and actually enjoy the motorhome the way it's meant to be. Now the Roadmaster Anti-Sway Bar is meant to replace the factory sway bar that was on the back here. Now the bar itself is much bigger. It's actually 1.5 inches in diameter, and it is made out of a chrome moly steel opposed to a different kind of steel that most sway bars are made out of, so it is going to be a little bit more rigid and provide us a little bit more support because it has less tendency to flex and have deflection in it. Now they're going to provide you with new polyurethane bushings as well. Now these are really going to reduce the amount of mushy feeling as well because typically they're normally just a rubber compound. Now polyurethane is going to hold up a lot better to most automotive chemicals, so since it's on the bottom of the motorhome, that's really going to help out making sure they last a long time. They're also going to be a little bit more stiffer than rubber, so they have less tendency to flex, which will give us the support we need by having a nice stiff support. But it's not going to be too rough to where it doesn't have any flex to where the ride's uncomfortable. Now, as far as the installation goes, it is a pretty straightforward process. I do recommend having an extra set of hands because the bar is pretty thick and it's pretty heavy. But it really just entails of removing the old one, putting the new one on, but when we go to put the end links on, we are going to have to drill a hole through the frame. But now that we've seen what the bar looks like, gone over some of the features, let's go through the installation process together. To begin our installation, we want to come underneath our motorhome, and on the very back of the axle, we'll find our sway bar. We're going to have a few mounts on the bottom of the axle, but we need to remove the end links first. So we'll just follow the bar until we get to the end link. The end link is going to be bolted to the side of the frame. So we want to come, it should be right in front of the tire on the outside of the frame, and there'll be a bolt going all the way through. Grab a 15mm socket, and we'll pull that bolt out. Now there is going to be one on each side of the frame, so once you have that first one loosened and removed, go ahead and move to the other side and pull that one out as well. Just be aware that once you pull that last bolt out, the sway bar may want to start to rotate, so you want to pay attention to where you are and not let it drop down on you. Now on the axle where those mounts are, we need to remove those bolts as well. There'll be one on the front and one on the back of the sway bar itself. Now this is the last thing holding the sway bar in place. So what I usually do is I'll remove one completely out of there. I'll loosen one up but leave it in there just a few threads so it doesn't come completely down. That way I can move to the other side and do that as well. And it'll really help out, especially if you have an extra set of hands so they can hold up one side and you can both gradually lower it down. You want to use a 17mm socket to pull those out. Again, I'm just going to leave a few threads there, that way I can move to the other side, do the same thing, and gradually lower this down. But now that I have a decent grip on it, I can hold it with one arm. I can remove the other bolt and pull the sway bar down the rest of the way. You let that go down on the ground, and we can get everything else ready now. So I like to sit my two sway bars in place so that we can get an idea of where the bushings need to go. Now if we just look at the old one in reference to the new one, we can see that our bushings are going to need to go right at this straight piece before it curves back. Now our new kit is going to come with new split bushings and grease to get them installed. Obviously you want to wear gloves because this gets pretty messy, but you want to take a good amount of grease and we're just going to coat the inside of the bushing. That's going to help prevent any kind of squeaking, and if any moisture gets inside of there, it's not going to be making a bunch of noise when we're driving down the road. So you just want a good amount inside that bushing so it's nice and coated. They're split bushings, so they'll just open up real easy and slide the bushing in place, and we can take our bracket and just slide it right over. Bushing on the other side is going to install exactly the same. Now with an extra set of hands, we're going to lift our sway bar up. Now in our application, we actually have a spacer because we have a track bar on the back. So you want to make sure you put that spacer back if you had one. We're going to reuse the factory hardware. So for now, Just want to make sure you get at least one bolt in on each side so the sway bar will at least hold itself up, and we can get the other bolts in place. Just again, keep in mind it is going to pivot a lot, so when you do let go, make sure you're not in the way and it's not going to swing and hit you. So I'm going to come back with that 17mm socket and make sure that all the bolts are nice and snug. Now once you have them snugged down, you want to come back with a torque wrench and torque all 4 bolts down to the specified amount in the instructions. Now we need to attach our end links to the end of our sway bar here. So we want to grab our end link. We're going to grab one of the 1/2-inch bolts out of our kit. We want to make sure we slide a flat washer over our bolt. We'll slide our bolt through the end link. We want to make sure we put another flat washer on there so that it's not pressing directly against the bushing. Then we'll pass our bolt through. Then on the other side, again, we'll put another flat washer on the inside of the sway bar. And we're going to leave it hand tight and secure it down using a 1/2-inch nylon lock nut. Just get it on there just tight enough to where it's not going to fall off, but we really don't need to tighten it down right now. We're going to do the same process over on the other end of our bar. Now that we got our end links on, we want to rotate the sway bar up to where we can get the end of the end link about 4.5 inches up on the frame, and you want to make sure that the end link is nice and straight when it's going up. Now obviously we have that bracket that's in the way of keeping our end link straight, and even if I were to come to the back side, again, it's not really straight, it's pointing towards the back. So normally we would raise that up and mark a hole right about 4.5 inches again, and we drill it out. But again, this is in the way, so what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the factory hole, and this little tab right here is actually a nut plate on the inside. So we're going to move to the inside of the frame, remove that nut plate, and use this hole to mount our end link to. A nut plate's just on a little hook type. You just slide it down and pull it out. Just like the lower end of our end link, I'm going to take a bolt with a flat washer, go all the way through the end link, make sure I put another flat washer on the inside of the bushing. We'll pass it through the frame. Then on the inside of the frame, we'll take another flat washer, go over our bolt, and we're going to loosely secure it with another nylon lock nut. And just like the other one on the lower side, we're going to do the same thing, remove that nut plate, and put our sway bar end link in using the same combination of hardware on the other side. We need to tighten up our end links now, so I'm going to grab a 3/4 inch wrench and socket, and I just want to snug them up just enough to where our end links are touching our sway bar, but we don't want to crush those bushings that are inside of there. We want to do the same thing in regards to the upper end link and where it meets the frame. You don't want to crush that either, so just tighten it up to where everything's touching, and then we'll come back and torque everything down. You'll find the torque specs in your instructions, but again, you don't want to crush those bushings, so you just want to watch as you're tightening them up and make sure they don't get too crushed or squished. You just want them to be touching and everything to be nice and secure. We'll go back and repeat that for any remaining hardware that we have. But once you have all your hardware torqued down, you're going to want to lower your motorhome down, take it for a test drive, listen for any unusual noises, and then you do want to double check your hardware shortly afterwards to make sure everything still is tight. But once that's all good, that'll finish up your installation and your look at the Roadmaster Rear Anti-Sway Bar.